the internet is gone. Every platform, every app, every news site, dark. You pick up your phone, and the screen shows full signal, but nothing loads. You try a call, it connects, then cuts. You turn on the television, static, on every channel except one. One channel, broadcasting the same announcement on a loop. You do not know what is happening outside your street. You do not know what is happening in the next city. You do not know if what the one remaining broadcast is telling you is true. Modern people have outsourced their entire awareness of reality to infrastructure they do not own, do not control, and cannot repair. Servers they have never seen. Cables they have never touched. Algorithms deciding what reaches them and what does not. Behind the Iron Curtain, this infrastructure did not fail. It was weaponized. Every telephone line was monitored. Every broadcast was controlled. Every piece of information that reached the population had passed through a state filter designed to produce compliance, not understanding. And yet, people knew. They knew what was happening across the border. They knew what the official broadcast was hiding. They knew which rumors were true and which were planted. They knew before the official announcement, before the censored newspaper, before the state television summary. Because they had built communication systems the state could not reach. From wire and wood and salvaged radio components, from codes embedded in ordinary language, from networks of people who had learned that the most dangerous thing a human being can possess, under a system that controls information, is accurate knowledge of what is actually happening. Stay with me, because number 5 on this list is the communication method that ran continuously across the entire Soviet bloc for decades, invisible to state surveillance, impossible to jam, requiring no electricity and no technology, and it is available to you right now without purchasing a single component. Let's begin. Number 1. The shortwave radio and homemade antenna. In the winter of 1968, in a Prague apartment block, 4 days after Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia, a university physics lecturer named Karel sat in his kitchen with a radio the size of a hardback book and a length of wire he had strung across his ceiling. The official Czechoslovak broadcast was telling its listeners that the situation was under control. Karel's radio was receiving the BBC World Service in English, Radio Free Europe in Czech, and Deutsche Welle in German. He was translating in real time for 6 neighbors sitting on his kitchen floor. Shortwave radio, the frequency band between approximately 3 and 30 MHz, has one property that makes it uniquely resistant to state information control. It bounces off the ionosphere and travels thousands of kilometers without any ground infrastructure whatsoever. There are no cables to cut. There are no servers to shut down. There are no relay towers to disable. A signal broadcast from London or Munich lands in a kitchen in Prague with nothing between the transmitter and the receiver except the atmosphere. The Soviet state jammed shortwave frequencies, extensively broadcasting noise on known Western frequencies to prevent reception. This jamming was expensive, required enormous transmitter infrastructure, and was never fully effective. Reception quality varied by location, by time of day, by atmospheric conditions, and by antenna design. Antenna design was where Iron Curtain listeners competed with the jamming apparatus. A longer antenna receives a stronger signal. A directional antenna rejects interference from unwanted directions. A wire stretched across a ceiling, horizontal, as long as the room allows, improves shortwave reception dramatically compared to the small telescoping antenna built into the radio. A wire run along a baseboard, up a wall, and across the ceiling in an L shape forms a crude but effective directional antenna that can be aimed by repositioning the radio relative to the wire. Outside, a wire strung between 2 points as high as possible, a roof edge, a chimney, a tree, connected to the radio by a feed line of any insulated wire. Dramatically extends the effective reception range. Shutterstock Carroll's ceiling wire was 7 meters long. It cost nothing. Invisible to any visitor not looking for it, it brought him accurate information about his own country while the official broadcast was actively lying to his neighbors. Number 2. The dead drop and physical message system. When electronic communication cannot be trusted, when telephone lines are monitored, when letters are opened, when digital messages leave records, information moves physically. This is not a Cold War relic. It is the fundamental principle that every intelligence service in the world still uses for its most sensitive communications. Because physical message transfer leaves no electronic trace by definition, behind the Iron Curtain, the dead drop, a location known to both sender and recipient, where messages are left and retrieved without the two parties ever meeting, was a practical communication tool used not just by intelligence operatives but by ordinary people who needed to share information that could not safely pass through monitored channels. The system requires 3 elements: a location, a signal, and a message. The location, any fixed point accessible to both parties without arousing suspicion. A specific loose brick in a wall, a hollow in a tree, the underside of a park bench, a gap behind a particular drainpipe, any concealed space that can be accessed naturally as part of normal movement through the environment. The signal, a visible indicator that a message has been left or retrieved, a chalk mark on a specific surface, a bottle placed at a particular angle on a windowsill, a piece of cloth in a specific window, a mark that communicates one bit of information, message present or message retrieved, to anyone who knows where to look, while meaning nothing to anyone who does not. The message, written on paper thin enough to be swallowed or burned in seconds if necessary. In some cases, not written at all, encoded in an object arrangement. A physical conflagration, a system of marks whose meaning existed only in the shared knowledge of the two parties. Polish solidarity. Movement members used dead drop systems throughout the early 1980s to coordinate activity across a country under martial law where open meeting and electronic communication had both been shut down simultaneously. They coordinated a movement of millions of people with paper, chalk marks, and hollow trees. Number 3. The code language system. Every language contains the capacity for infinite additional layers of meaning. Words mean what they mean in the dictionary. They also mean what the people using them agree they mean. A second layer, semantic system, invisible to anyone who has not been initiated into the agreement. Behind the Iron Curtain, where telephone conversations were monitored and informants were embedded in social circles. Ordinary language developed elaborate second-layer coding systems in every country of the Soviet bloc. The systems were not cryptographic in the technical sense. They did not use mathematical substitution. They used shared metaphor, shared reference, shared contextual knowledge that allowed two speakers to conduct a conversation with two simultaneous meanings: the surface meaning that surveillance heard, and the actual meaning that both parties understood. In Poland, discussing the weather meant discussing the political situation. A warm front from the east meant Soviet pressure. The forecast meant anticipated state action. In Romania, commercial language carried political meaning. The merchandise arrived meant forbidden materials had been received. The market is closed today meant a meeting had been shut down. In Czechoslovakia, after 1968, music and literature references became dense code. Album titles and quotations carried second-layer meanings understood by the initiated and opaque to state monitors. The cost, nothing. The infrastructure required, shared knowledge between two people. The vulnerability to interception, effectively zero. The surface conversation contained no detectable signal. You and anyone you trust can construct such a system in an afternoon. Write down 10 phrases, assign each an agreed second meaning. Memorize the list, destroy the list. The system now exists only in 2 human memories. No server holds it. No algorithm can scan for it. This is the oldest communication security technology in human history. It requires nothing except to people who trust each other. Stop here. Think about your communication systems right now. Every message you send passes through servers owned by corporations, operating under the legal jurisdiction of governments. Every phone call is logged as metadata: who called whom, when, for how long, even when the content is not recorded. Every search query is stored. Every location your phone occupies is tracked continuously. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is publicly documented, legally established infrastructure. Behind the Iron Curtain, people knew this about their communication systems because the state told them, implicitly, through the consequences of what was said in monitored spaces. Modern people know it and have decided it does not matter, until the moment it does. Write in the comments, if every digital communication platform went offline tomorrow, how would you reach the 5 people most important to your survival? Most people have no answer that does not depend on the same infrastructure that just went offline. Number 5. The Samizdat Information Network. The word means self-published. In Russian, self-publish. A contraction of that became one of the most important words in the history of information resistance. Behind the Iron Curtain, the state controlled all printing infrastructure. Every printing press, every typewriter in institutional use, every photocopier was registered, monitored, and subject to inspection. The production of unauthorized text was a criminal offense. So unauthorized text was produced by hand. A document, a news report, a political analysis, a piece of literature the state had banned. Accurate information about an event the official media was misrepresenting was typed on a manual typewriter, with carbon paper underneath, producing 4 or 5 copies simultaneously. Each copy was passed to a recipient who read it, retyped it with fresh carbon paper, and passed the new copies onward. A single document, entering this network at one point, could reach tens of thousands of readers within weeks. Each link in the chain saw only the person who passed them the document and the people they passed it to. No single person knew the full extent of the network. The information could not be stopped without finding every person who had ever touched it, which was logistically impossible. The Samizdat network carried novels that won Nobel Prizes. It carried accurate accounts of atrocities the official media buried. It kept the cultural resistance of entire nations alive through decades of suppression. The technology, a manual typewriter, carbon paper, time, the willingness to pass the document forward. In a modern context, the principle translates directly. Handwritten documents, printed pages, physical distribution through trusted networks. Each node reproducing and passing forward information that cannot be digitally suppressed because it does not exist digitally. The Samizdat network was not defeated by the Soviet state. It outlasted it. Number 6. The 2-meter radio and local mesh network. Shortwave radio receives information from distant transmitters. It does not allow two-way local communication between members of a community who need to coordinate in real time. For local coordination, for the kind of street-level, neighborhood-level communication that becomes critical when centralized infrastructure fails. Iron Curtain resistance communities used a different radio technology. Very high-frequency radio in the 2-meter band allows short-range two-way communication between simple, low-power transceivers that can be built from salvaged components or purchased inexpensively in the guise of hobbyist equipment. In the Soviet bloc, Amateur radio, officially tolerated as a technical hobby under strict licensing, was practiced by operators who used its legitimate framework to maintain communication skills and equipment that had obvious applications beyond hobbyist purposes. The 2-meter transceiver can be built from electronics salvage components. Its range extends several kilometers in urban environments and further in open terrain. Multiple transceivers create a mesh, each node relaying messages beyond direct range without any central infrastructure. The antenna is simple, a half-wave dipole. 2 lengths of wire, approximately 50 centimeters each, connected to a feed line, constructed in minutes from any available wire. A community of 6 households with simple transceivers and rooftop wire antennas maintains continuous communication across a neighborhood regardless of what happens to the telephone network, the internet, or the power grid. Here is what all of this converges to. Modern communication infrastructure is the most centralized, most monitored, and most fragile system modern people depend on. It is fundamentally dependent on a small number of critical nodes whose failure cascades instantly and completely. The people who built these systems were not technical specialists, teachers, factory workers, students. They built them because the official infrastructure had been turned against them, to monitor, to deceive, to suppress the accurate information they needed to survive. The information moved. The networks held. Knowledge that the official broadcast was lying spread through cities and across borders using wire, paper, chalk marks, and the human capacity for creating meaning that no surveillance apparatus has ever fully learned to read. Your communication infrastructure has not been turned against you yet. Build the redundancy before it is. A shortwave radio, a simple antenna, an agreed code with people you trust, a physical dead drop, a plan for how information moves when the screen goes dark. The people who translated BBC broadcasts on kitchen floors in Prague in 1968 did not have time to prepare after the tanks arrived. You have time now. Use it.